Okay, we're on. We're live. Okay, so once again, I want to say thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Quite a curious thing that you're wearing red and I'm wearing red today. That was intentional. Uh,
That's for
Unfortunately, I
blood.
can't join you with the Dread Gang, but let's see how that goes afterwards.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
So James, thank you. Thanks for doing
My
this.
pleasure, Sochi.
So
Anytime now.
you're one of those that I really, I love to follow on social media. You have
Yeah.
a wonderful, a very interesting family. Uh, yes, shout out to Toby.
Yes, so in
uh,
fact, I told him, I said, I'm about to go on a recording. So he's downstairs watching YouTube. So I'm like, I'm about to go on a recording, and he's like, does it mean that you leave me? I say, yes, I'm leaving you. Goodbye. So
awesome.
yeah,
You should create a channel for that kid. You make
everybody keeps saying that thing.
and your lovely
Everybody
wife
keeps saying,
Fatima, who is also quite inspirational. Quite.
yeah,
She has on that story. I hope one day I get to, interview her too. I know she too
yeah,
has. She's packed with a lot of backstory and also drive.
yeah,
So thanks again for doing this. I'm really honored that you accepted.
yeah.
So just to kick off, you want to maybe just say a few words, just introduce yourself. How do you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, so usually I'm James Omokwe. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker in general. But then again, in filmmaking, there are many things that I do. Uh, I produce, I direct, um, I edit. I do a lot of things um, in terms of in in that entire creative space. Sorry, hold on. In that entire creative space. Sorry. So I do a lot of things in the entire creative space. I produce, I executive produce, I edit, I direct. I'm very involved in the story making process, especially when I'm trying to tell my kind of stories, and I'm sure I'll get into that in a bit. But basically, that's what I do. But in general, I'm a filmmaker. I'm sort of like a nerd. I'm not a full blown nerd, but yeah, I play video games. I watch TV a lot because I learn. But apart from that, that's just me.
Awesome. So I think generally that's how you introduce yourself now. But
Yeah.
growing up, what was it like? What's how would I say it? What was the your timeline like towards where you are right now? Your inspirations, things that happened that maybe pushed you or notched you in the people that maybe you met that maybe inspired and pushed you
Yeah.
into this area or even shaped you or taught you or things like that.
I think when I was in the university, well, it was growing up, I always wanted to do, I always wanted to tell stories. I know it may sound cliche, but when you grew up watching things like Voltron, Super Ted, all those things on NNT 2005, all those kind of stories, and there were adult stuff like Sledgehammer, Secrets of the Sands, all that stuff that we were used to. I always wanted to be able to tell stories in whatever form. And when I was quite young, I used to play with bottle corks. So, and it's funny that like when I think about it now, I'm like, my mother actually allowed me, to do those things. I'm sure somewhere in the back of her mind, she thought I was mentally disturbed. Like I literally, like I had a bench full of bottle corks, and they had their own personal lives. And I used to document that stuff. And I used to play table soccer a lot with my friends. So, I mean, some of my friends will go to their houses and we'll play table soccer, and that's the end. But me, I will bring the corks back to my house. Each person has their own life. This one is married to this one. They have children, and I will spend hours developing, these characters, developing their lives. And I will be playing. And then I used to live in First Act, so NEPA was an issue. Sometimes we never used to really have light. So all that time, I'm spending time, just, there was one guy, I can still remember. In fact, one guy, I used to call him Denver Boyd or something like that. And there was one guy I used to call Beckham. They all had their own lives and stuff like that. But eventually, I outgrew all that stuff. And then I think towards when I was finishing secondary school and trying to get into university, I was a bit confused because I didn't really think that there was going to be a career in telling stories or whatever. In those days, people would tell you things like, "Oh, go and be a mechanical engineer, go and be this, go and be that," all that funny stuff. So I think while I was trying to get into University of Lagos, my sister studied urban and regional planning. So my mom, told me I should write on my form urban and regional planning, so I can run the same footsteps with my sister XYZ. So I started wrote jam, I think that year, I didn't even know my name had come out, to be honest. I think they had done like 7 weeks or so of school before my mother now even asked one guy that was like the sub-dean. And I was like, oh, she just wanted to check that they didn't hear anything. And the guy was like, your son's name came out how many weeks ago that I didn't know he had resumed. So we went to school, tried to rush, registration, did late registration, all that stuff. And I remember first day I got to school, they were supposed to have a test. It was statistics. And I see, first of all, I hate math. I hate anything that has to do with calculation. Well, now I like it because we're calculating money, but anything that has to do with calculation, those days and everything, I hated it so much. So I remember that time we were going to do, it was statistics. And I went to the guy, I can't remember his name now, but I walked into his office and I was like, "Sir, I just resumed today. Please, can we move this test? One thing. And the guy looked at me and was like, was this a joke? At least I should go and write tests. If I'm not ready to write tests, then I'm ready to fail." So that day I cried. I cried. But anyway, I tried to manage myself, but it was a struggle. And I knew that this urban and regional planning wasn't for me. Like, I was just like, if I had kept doing it, it would have just been, it wouldn't have made any sense. So I had written my first semester exams. I had written my first semester exams. And it was the second semester exams that I said, no, I can't do this. So I dropped out. I told my mom, I was like, you know what, I want to study creative arts. This is really what I want to do. Even though it was film and TV that I wanted to study abroad, but obviously I couldn't do it. So she was like, yeah, okay. So I wrote JAMB again, and then I passed. But apparently, I think there was an issue in Unilag, so we resumed a year after. I think they went and burnt VC's lodge or something like that. But anyway, we shall resumed, and that's how I went back to do creative arts. And then I did the whole 4 years. So while they, in the creative arts, I think it was my year 3 or something like that, was when I now started telling myself that, okay, I wanted to tell stories in form of film. So I would imagine, like, in fact, there was a short film that we did called Grass. It's still on Facebook till today as I'm talking to you. But how I imagined doing that film, I had thought about how all the angles I wanted to do, all that stuff. So I got a friend of mine whose dad used to work at NTA. Her name is Shirley, and I think her dad's name was Peter Oke or Patrick Oke. I can't remember what it was. Their son was Okesha. So she spoke to her dad. They gave us equipment. I shot the thing, and it really. I mean, now I look at it, I'm like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, it was nice then. Like, in my mind, I was like, oh God, I made a film, or I made a short film. And then we put it up there, and as soon as I did it, for me, I wanted to keep doing stuff like this. I wanted to keep doing stuff like so. I graduated, worked for Lionel Sidahusa for a bit. They got New York Film Academy to come to Nigeria. I did like a 1-month diploma course. And to all fairness to Linus, I mean, he supported us because we didn't pay for it. I think then it was $3,500. But he just said, just go do the thing, at least and get a diploma. So we did the course 1 month. As soon as that happened, after I learned everything I needed to learn, I was like, I need to make my first film. So, I went ahead, long story short, I made my first film called Awakening. I produced it with Ethan. Me and Ethan directed and edited it. I did that in filming in 2013. I was nominated for an AMVCA. I went on to do stuff for Africa. I went on to do stuff for Ebony Live TV. Then 2015, I started producing a TV show for Ike Osaki-Odua, and then I started doing my own stuff. And 4 shows down the line, I'm here. So yeah, that's me in summary.
That's quite dramatic, I would say. It's
That's a
been like
compressed summary, man.
compressed summary. I'm sure if we even dug deeper, we'll find a lot more explosions and
Yeah, I know, I
crashing
know, I
buildings.
know.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
How do you view stories? I mean, you think of those ideas as stories, but yeah, let's break it down to you, because I think somehow um, the manner in which you approach the films you make or the work you do, somehow maybe is tied to how you actually see stories, how you break it down, what you're trying to tease out of those little ideas. How do you view stories? How do you define it? How do you take it apart and put it together to make sense?
So in the simplest form, because a lot of times I try not to be very um and I use the word elitist in the way that I answer some of these questions. Because sometimes when you ask people, they'll tell you, yeah, I do this, that. The truth is, when I was younger, when I was in secondary school, yeah, there's something we used to do. They used to call it forging. So you come and tell your class members, oh, have you watched RoboCop part 7, which doesn't exist? And obviously, these guys are none the wiser. And you're like, oh yeah, you watch the film, and then you proceed to holding people spellbound and telling them you're just creating things in your head. There's no structure, but you're just shy, and there's no resolution, there's no rising, there's no conflict, there's just nothing. There's none of those things that you use in script writing. You're just telling a story, and people are watching and they're listening to you. And if you take the griots, like around the world, and how they take history and their culture, and they pass it on from one generation to the other, it's stories that you're telling. You're telling somebody, so this is what I did at so and so point, and this is what I did at so and so point, and so on and so forth. And they're listening to you, and they'll take that same story, even though bits and pieces of that story will be either removed or twisted and so on and so on, but they'll pass it to somebody else. And I think that that's how I view stories, in terms of, this is me trying to hold people spellbound, and getting them to sit down and actually listen to what I'm saying visually. Now, nowadays, I mean, that's how I started out, but now it's more like I now have some sort of direction. So if you notice, some of the TV shows that I'm doing now have a lot of cultural and historical background to them. So at George Riona, is more about the things that we didn't get to know about ancient Nigeria. These are cultures, though fiction, but it's some way in teaching people. So I'm sort of like a griot, telling people, oh, in so and so time, these stories happened. So for instance, with Ajoche, it was 18th or 19th century Idoma, right? There was a backdrop somewhere across the episode where the foreigners came in, during the time when the foreigners were coming, before they what's it called? They took over Nigeria. You see bits and pieces as the backdrop, even though the main story is fictional. In this current stories, it's 12th century Ishekiri, which is Riona, but giving a glimpse of the world of Ishekiri in the 12th century, which a lot of people don't even know. Like when you sit down and you're listening to these guys these griots who hold history, and they're telling you about the Ishekiri people and so on and so forth, you're amazed when they tell you things like some Ishekiri people came from Egypt, and you don't know these things, right? And then you're given an opportunity and you're dicing it with fiction, and then putting all the structures of storytelling, and then you're showing it in a visual form to either a housewife or a husband or a kid at 8 o'clock in front of a television. So he's learning a lot, and that's now the new direction. For us, it's more like historical lessons and teachings. So when people ask me now that, oh, what kind of films do you want to make? I'm like, I want to make period pieces. Things like, in fact, my new obsession, even though I've not read the book, is Jagwanana. Like I want to do Jagwanana. It's like Nigerian design, 1970s. Do you understand? The whole production design, all that stuff. Take people back. I've read the synopsis, like take people back to what it was like in the 1970s. So for me, storytelling is, first of all, I would like to put people in a place, choose something from whatever it is that I'm telling you. I want you to learn something from it, not just Michael went to or this one went to that. More about culture, more about ways of life, tradition, more about your African tradition that you didn't know about. You find that a lot of people didn't even know that. In fact, on Rihanna, the language they speak there is Shakiri. A lot of people keep telling me, it sounds like Yoruba. They don't even know what it sounds like, right? So these are opportunities for you to teach people and then show people that, this is what you can do, by also keeping them spellbound and using, the suspense and whatever, keep them in their seats and let them see something else fictional, but they're also learning from it, by sitting in front of a television is what it is.
I think it's quite interesting how you made reference to the griot. Interestingly, my Instagram page is called Griot, or rather, my website is called Griot Notes.
Yeah.
and hopefully the YouTube channel. Well, I think it's quite apt because there is so much of the essence of storytelling that we draw from that one image, one metaphor, that the griots. How so next to the king, the griots were the most important people in the community.
Because they were the keepers of.
Exactly.
They're like keepers of history, man.
History,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
If you wanted to know, they just ask you. They will just ask you more or less. Also, just like a lot of parts in Africa, they will just ask you the name. What's your name? You say James. James, son of who? You say Omokwe. You say yes, and then they begin to tell you. Let's take some steps back. This was your. You're from this lineage, and you say no, you're not. You're from this lineage, and this was how you started. And then maybe they then begin to delve into the economics of your identity, or even the sociology of your identity. Why you have big head, why you have small toes, or why you even have money in your family, why you're wealthy or why you're poor. In my own place, they would tell me, in my own place, if I told somebody my name, they would say, where, which one, which Azul, okay, in which this quarter is okay.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, do you know your royalty? I say, yeah, well, kind of. They'll tell you, okay, this is why we say you are royalty, even if you're not the OB or something like that. And you get a lot of stories from them. How they were just like they were just the melting pot of all everybody's history, everybody's story, and that really made them popular. Sorry, it's really really important and powerful. But it turns out that they are so rare right now. They are so rare because westernization, a lot of people, the draining out of the culture, assimilating a lot of other things and forfeiting a lot of, the more important stuff. But I think, and that's one of the reasons, or the trust for these kind of conversations, where we can actually document these conversations or these perspectives about storytelling, and hopefully, try to propagate impactful storytelling. And that's why I really, really appreciate the points that you've raised about stories not just being for entertainment or for pleasure, but there's a whole lot that you can gain from also educating people. Thanks for that. So recently, not even recently, just when sometime this week, you rounded up production for Rihanna. Congratulations. How was that? How has it been? How many episodes in all?
260. That's 300.
That is drilling. Wow.
240 minutes of TV.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So far I've done more than 15,000 minutes of TV so far.
And I think that's as much time as anybody needs to catch up on Rihanna if they haven't seen it yet. So you need to carve out that time from your life.
It's crazy.
Just catch up on this story.
No, Rihanna is 3,240 minutes actually. So you count Rihanna, you count Ajocha, you count Unbroken, count some of the other things I've done. Yeah, about 15K. minutes. It's crazy, man. It's like I always tell people like doing TV productions are one of that. It's like open heart surgery is difficult because it's a big budget production, and then you're working with like so many people and so many elements and so many things that you have to make sure um moving together at the same time. So you have your actors, you have your props, you have your set, you have medical, food, like millions and millions of things, and on a daily basis for 7 to 8 to 9 months you're making sure, trying to deal to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And the worst part of it is that it's not like you can stop and say, oh, we've taken a break, or let's stop. Because once it starts to air on TV, you can't stop because the show can't go to black. So it's a crazy experience, but I'm used to it.
I mean, I have to give it to you. You would have to be displaying or showing a lot of tenacity, trying to juggle all these things. So I wonder
Yeah.
whether local. I'm sorry, whether here in Nigeria or abroad, even if it is Ghana. Who do you look to for inspiration?
Yo, so my the two biggest guys that inspire me, and I'll explain why. John Favreau and how can I forget this guy's name? His name was in my head just now. The guy who produces the MCU films. What's his name? How can I forget his name, Joe? Kevin Feige. Thank you. Now, why? Why do I say those two guys? Because I'm primarily a producer. Now, how these guys have created a network of shows that depend on each other but are still individual. So you know how you create one show and you hold people spellbound to that one show, and once that show is done, everybody's like, oh, it was a good run, XYZ, blah blah blah, on to the next. They've created an entire universe that keeps people, like, you are constantly fed with content across board over a period of time. Like, these guys have been making movies since 2008, right? Like with Iron Man 2. In fact, recently I went and sat down. I haven't even finished, but I'm watching the entire MCU all over again. And just seeing how each film is interconnected. And what trips me is not just the fact that on the creative side they've achieved this, also on the business side of it, in terms of syndication, TV shows, merchandising, all that stuff. And is one guy that sat down and is like, oh, I think we can do XYZ. Now, John Favreau's one, the reason why I love him is because I've seen him grow from being a comedian to a drama, actor, and then
Yeah, I
directing,
thought of
some
how.
other things, and he
Yeah,
did
it's quite
Iron
an
Man.
interesting choice. I mean, because he actually transitioned through those
Yeah,
dimensions.
yeah. So exactly. So he did Iron Man and all that stuff, and he's constantly, after he did Iron Man and a couple of other things here and there, then they bumped him up to do the Jungle Book, and then he had to work with the guys to use this new technology of mocapping and use digital screens to create those images, and then he's bumped up to executive producer on The Mandalorian, and you can see how because he reminds me, because the other day I was watching like a directors roundtable when they were discussing about The Mandalorian. It's on Disney Plus. If anybody has access to it, you can go see it. So he was with Rick Famuyiwa, Robert Rodriguez, all these guys that directed the show, and they're really talking about their growth process, and how they actually from scratch envisioned the way the show was going to go, and the approach that they used, and so on and so on. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, this guy's a god, right? Like he literally went from, like I said initially, being a drama comedic person, to this guy who is handling these huge projects. And what trips me about everything is how he transcended from one genre to the next. In fact, if you leave him now, he'll go somewhere and do something like The Chef. I think that's the name of that film, where he was a chef in the film or something like that. He comes back and
Yeah,
doing
so they
superhero
had
movies.
the movie and the series.
Yeah, so he comes back, he's doing these superhero movies, and he's transcending, and he's not contained by, he's not restricted by genre or whatever. He's very flexible, and he's growing him, as he moves on from one project to the other. Those are the two guys that inspire me, especially because of what they do and because of what I do and because I work in TV. And it's just amazing to watch them work and grow that multiverse. It's amazing work. It's truly amazing work.
I mean, yeah, because even so, with them, it's especially in cinema, it's quite a laudable endeavor, because now what you have is, even the Conjuring now has a universe. And it's they can't say that I think they've given credit to the whole the whole enlightenment exactly, that the Marvel universe has actually opened a whole lot of other cinema producers to the possibility of actually networking or linking stories in that multiplex model. And it's quite a laudable thing. And for him especially, to be able to bring his growth, his career growth into and bring it to bear on that development is quite laudable too. Awesome. Awesome. Well, if I'm wondering now, having said that, I'm wondering if you had like billions of naira, if you didn't have a limit to budget limit, if you didn't have a budget limit, what kind of stories would you focus on? Would you continue to make epic stories like Rihanna, cultural this? What's it like? What's that? What shape does that kind of story take in your head if you didn't have a limit?
I think just for the sole reason of transporting people into a world. Can you hear me? Sorry, hold on. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I could hear you then.
Yeah, so it's for the sole reason of transporting people to a world that they are not used to. Is what my thing is. So nowadays, if I'm asked, oh, do you want to do a regular drama? I don't want to. There's nothing interesting in doing it. I mean, you see people that you see every day. Yes, a nice story, but there's nothing intriguing about it. Yeah, there's a story in it, but you're not. I want to take your suspension of disbelief to 200 or 2,000, it's about 200 million%, where you're in a world where you're like, wow, like you are sucked into this universe. So period pieces are my thing. So if somebody gave me billions of naira or whatever, I would do a story in Nigeria in the 1903, 1945, 1970, build an entire world with cars, props, houses, all that stuff, and dump you, the viewer, inside, right? And then tell my story, whatever it is that I want to tell. There are so many things I wanted to do a story that the Civil War is a backdrop. I had a story that we commissioned for somebody to write. It's about this woman and her husband Igbo woman and her husband who are trying to make a living just after the Civil War. So, when, everybody came back and they gave them £20 or whatever, and really just, trying to get back into society, but then, tales of war from the Civil War, people they've lost are haunted the woman and so on and so forth. I mean, those are interesting stories to tell. I mean, to be honest, we've run out of stories. All the stories on African Magic Epic or whatever, somebody's husband, they snatch somebody's husband away, they cook poison, mother-in-law, as it's okay, right? We can tell those stories again, but put a different backdrop to it, and it will be fresh. So yeah, if I had $1 billion, that's what I would do. Those are the kind of stories that I would tell.
I can see your attraction for Cyprian Quincy's Jaguar Nana.
Yeah, like to be honest, like the first thing that got my mind, ask Ethan now, the first thing we wanted to do from the get-go was Passport of Malamila. From the get, apparently everybody wants to do Passport of Malamila. I got copies of the book. I still have like many copies somewhere in my house, and because I remember reading that book when I was a kid, but the funny thing is that it was torn, but it wasn't from top to bottom. I read like bits and pieces of it. And I kept asking, I was like, there's this book I read, I don't know who the guy is, but I started explaining it, and somebody was like, oh, it's Passport of Malamina. So I got the book, I read it again, I was like, But unfortunately, I know there's some animation company that's doing an animated whatever on it. I know somebody has to film
Magic Carpet, Fedi Adime Face.
Yeah. And I know some guy has the film rights, but I don't think he's doing anything, but we're still on it. I mean, because another thing is our culture is so beautiful, such like, is it the Igbos, is it the Northerners, is it the Yorubas? Like, it's colorful, and you want to put those things on screen. You want people to live that era, because when I talk to a lot of people, it's funny how people think that in like Nigeria, like before, during slave trade or before the white men came, that Africans were animals. Like, oh, they weren't educated, they lived on trees and all that stuff. We're doing research for Rihanna. The Iron Age started in this, our Africa, and people were smoldering iron before the white man even knew how to do it. And you are hearing these things and you're like, what? I was watching a documentary of how they were saying, oh, why are they telling people that Christopher Columbus discovered America? Like, Africans were going to America, creating boats, doing all that stuff. But how many people know those stories? Do you get my point? So, I mean, it is what it is.
I know we've had I think it was just a TV adaptation of the book, Jagwanana. It was the 1970s. I fear to say 80s, but actually it's 1970s TV adaptation of Jagwanana's daughter. I saw that too, and it was quite well done. It had that. It was in 1970. I'll check YouTube. I'll send you the link.
Please do.
Yeah, I saw it had this thing. It was, sorry, not Jagwanana. It was Jagwanana's daughter. There are two of them.
That's true. That's the follow-up.
Yes, so there's Jagwanana and there's Jagwanana's daughter. So the TV adaptation I saw was done by NTA. I think it was done by NTA. It was Jagwanana's daughter. I mean, it made sense. They could easily crunch, munch this thing, the Jagwanana story as a backstory to maybe sort that out. Yeah, you could do.
Let me tell you something from a business point of view. This is why sometimes I get upset with NTA. If the right sets of people, and I'm not saying the right sets of people are not there, I'm just saying the right sets of people were there. Do you know how much adaptations, and it's not like the government cannot afford the adaptations that they could do as NTA originals? Ah, my God. I don't want to think about it. But it's okay. It's all right. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Awesome. So the pandemic is hot and it's cooling, thankfully. But I just wonder how does it story? How have you been keeping sane during the lockdown?
Well, should I say fortunately, the lockdown hit when we were preparing for Rihanna. So obviously we were working anywhere. We had to do what we needed to do. We took a break during the entire, when everyone was locked down, and then when we resumed, it was crazy because now when you're doing a TV show, you've locked down a budget. But immediately you come out of lockdown, you have added costs that you have to now think about because you have to keep people safe. You have to put necessary precautions. You are thinking of tests. You are thinking of all sorts of things, and it's so much money. I remember the first one bill that they threw my way. I wanted to faint. A bill for the entire testing of the cast and crew for the period that we were doing the show, and it was a 90 million naira bill. And I'm like, yo, who am I? Like, how, But I think that God's so kind. I mean, there's no way in this world, even the people that go on the street, there's no way you can keep yourself safe 100%. To be honest, we shot that show doing, keeping our, following the COVID rules. But we had less than 0 point something percent infection. Somebody got sick, but they didn't get sick from set. but we isolated the person immediately. Well, the person was isolated at their house. So when they got to when they were at home and they didn't, come, there was another person, luckily in our edit team, who never interacted with anybody on set or whatever. But I think she went home, came back, she got it. So we isolated the entire building, did tests for everybody, treated everybody. Out of I think there were like 10 people or so, like 2 people had it. One was asymptomatic, the other one was sick. But we treated everybody and we tested again, everybody was fine. So I think in the entire period of filming, I'm grateful because we didn't have casualties. Yes, people will come, do their temperature check, wash their hands, wear their gloves, masks, remove it when they have to because we're filming and put it back on. But it was tough, but we necessarily didn't, and I'm grateful that we didn't have casualties. Like I didn't have somebody who had come to set and interacted with like 50 people, then fall sick, then I'm worried about how to test 50 people. No, that didn't happen. But it slowed down a lot of things because again, you have to be careful, especially doing a big show like that. You're also a target because there's some people that tell you, why are you filming during this period? Meanwhile, if you go outside now, people are jumping bus. But, you have to, create a balance and just make sure that you're doing the right thing and keeping people safe, which is very important. It was difficult, but we pulled through. I won't lie.
I know you still have a podcast where you interview industry experts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm conscious of the time I had actually begged you for. So, and you're busy.
It's okay. I'm okay. Yeah.
But it's, just while as we wind down, I know you've been interviewing a lot of experts in the industry, and you've in as much as you've impacted your own knowledge, your own experience, you've also gotten feelers from other industry experts. I think so. As an expert yourself, that's where I'm going. As an expert yourself, what advice would you give those who are looking to be better storytellers? I know I'm looking for tips. How can I be a better storyteller? What should I be building on? What skills should I be honing?
Okay, first, I'm not an expert, but if you want to, the thing I always tell people is something I learned from Bob Iger, and it's innovate or die. You see, most times people in the space of storytelling, sometimes people only care about the story, but don't care about the medium on what that story is going to ride on. I mean, you could tell stories in different ways. You could tell stories for film, tell stories in written form, Instagram, whatever, Twitter, and all that stuff. But the question is, always think of your stories as a product. And how does it get from you to the person who is going to listen to it? I mean, you can say, call yourself a griot, call yourself a storyteller all you want, but if people don't want to hear you, there's no point. You're just talking to yourself. Nobody's going to want to listen to the story. So I think Africans have always had storytelling locked down. We're learning it. We're learning the structures, learning how to accurately tell the story as we go along. But it's the medium that is the issue. If the medium doesn't make sense, nobody's going to listen to the story. And I think that as storytellers, we need to also involve the medium as an important tool. So I'll give you an example. There's a thing that I'm working on, and it's a show in quotes, but it lives inside social media. So it's not just uploading videos and saying, oh yeah, so this episode came out today, this episode is coming out tomorrow. It's involving every aspect of social media in the storytelling. So, and when I say every aspect, I'm talking about the upload that you do on your regular Instagram, Insta stories, Twitter, Clubhouse, all those things. All those things, even though different social mediums are in, this story is hinged on all of them. So for you to get 100% of the entire story, you would have to go through all these things, to get a full picture of what the story is. Now, that way, it's us thinking outside the box and saying, so there's social media. How do we involve the social media everyday use? And then, putting it in storytelling. There's a thing that happens on TikTok, because I'm on TikTok a lot these days. Like TikTok is like once I enter like this, I can spend like 2 hours on TikTok. So there are a couple of people that do this thing called a perfect loop. So usually TikTok videos have a timer under, so you know when the video is about to end or so on and so on. But when you're doing a loop video, you don't see a timer. And sometimes it's like this loop goes into like an infinity loop because it keeps playing and you don't know where the beginning, I mean, when you start it, you know that this is the beginning, but by the time it's done like 3 minutes in, you don't know where the beginning is and where the end is. I mean, you have an idea, but it's a perfect loop. And sometimes it's fun to watch, right? But that's content. Now, whether I like it or not, people they're telling you a story, but they've encompassed the social structure of TikTok, right? And those stories can only be told on TikTok. They can't be told on Twitter. Neither can they be told on Facebook. Neither can they be told on whatever. The same way you have certain stories that can be told on Twitter, but like when you have threads or stories, somebody that said, oh, thread one, this is what happened, blah, blah. You can't have those on TikTok because TikTok is not text-based. So the truth is, we are telling the stories. How are we telling our stories? We need to think about just not the stories, but the medium in which those stories are going to be told. We need to evolve with the times. So it's not just, oh, I'm a storyteller. Okay, great, you're a storyteller. But I'll give you another example. I mean, you watch these things, it's like Black Mirror Bandersnatch. You see how brilliant that thing is? Like it allows you to take control. So it's no more, so I'm sitting down watching a story because I want to see how it goes. Now, I want to see how it goes because I have control over how it goes. Do you understand? Now, that's a different form of storytelling. There's a story, but the medium is different. Is what it is.
Big words. But I really appreciate that. I appreciate your time and the wisdom that you've imparted. Thank you again, James. And yeah, so we still have that 300 and how many hours again of your content?
3,240 hours. 3,240 minutes.
All right. I'll write it down. I'm going to take this recording. I'll write it down so everybody just puts in notes.
Yeah.
Thanks again, James. Really appreciate your time. We'll be reaching out. Hope we get a chance to do this again.
Anytime. And just let me know. Yesterday, I in my mind, I thought it was Wednesday. So in the night, I was like, oh my God, I forgot, and then I went and checked the Zoom link.
I was like, did I miss something? I went back to my calendar, I checked it. Nah, man. It's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, James. This was great.
I'm available.
All right.
That's all.
My regards to the family.
Will do. Thank you so much for having me. God bless.
Thanks, bro.